field. In the center, there's a core router. It's the Foundry MLX that you saw a few slides ago. It's a combined switch router type deal, so it can both switch on ports and switch traffic, and it can route as well. To that router were connected all the switches in the datum close. We ran VLAN tagging to over all the links. We ran VLAN tagging over all the links to the datum close. These bold ones were the bigger ones that we used as distribution switches with more switches attached to them. So I think this was camping 2, and there was a whole bunch of switches hanging attached to that for further distribution out on the south camping field. We had a server park here. We had one router on site to take care of the uplink, and we had another one here in Berlin to take care of more peering and transit there. So in the end, we had quite some address space available, luckily. So we could be a bit creative in assigning subnets, in assigning VLAN tags. So we decided upon a system where we would make a correspondence between the VLAN tag, the router interface, and the IP subnet actually in use. So if you had an IP address somewhere, so somebody came and said, oh, there's a problem with this IP address, I can't get DHCP there or something, then you immediately knew it was this router interface, it was this VLAN tag, and this is the IP address of the switch that handles the distribution there. And that was a great time saver, because you don't always have to go back to some sort of wiki that is usually outdated, or some sort of having to trail through various config files to find that information. So some various traffic statistics. The west, behind the Hex Center, camping place, 800 megabits peak. It's quite well. Villages in the southeast, Freifunk, others, 850 megabits. Gigabit to south camping, well done. You made the 10 gig we run there worth it. And Audio Village was another big one. The streaming guys, basically. 140 megabit to wireless, which I think is sort of comparable to what we did at the Congress. And the Projektleitung was also very active in the last 2 days, speaking to 600 kilobits per second. I think they were busy doing press interviews or something. So I'll spend a few more words on design and issues you run into when you try to do such a sort of thing. Our objective was to bring Ethernet to all the people around here, all over the campsite, and have that up and running as much as possible. We decided to use lots of subnetting, lots of VLANs, and decided to use that over one big VLAN where everybody would be in, because you can easily localize local issues. You can keep a network loop very local. You can keep a rogue DHCP server very local. And if there's a problem on one particular subnet, because there's a loop on the Ethernet, there is a rogue DHCP server, or somebody sending rogue IPv6 router advertisements, or whatever, ARP spoofing, MAC flooding, it's all very localized. It just impacts one switch or two switches and whoever just happens to be there, and you can easily locate it, isolate it, and tell those people to stop, basically. The predictability of router interfaces versus VLAN tags and IP subnets was a very big time saver. So the IP subnet with 81.163.24 would probably be a /23. It would have router interface 24, it would have VLAN tag 224, and the IP address of the switch would also end in .24. So it is all very easy to find your way through the network without actually having to memorize large tables with randomly allocated IP addresses handed out in order of time. Redundancy generally adds complexity, and we don't have a 100% uptime guarantee SLA thing going on here. It's nice, but at some point you have to say, this is too much effort to put into something fragile. It's more likely to actually fall over because of all the redundancy you put in. Ethernet isn't really built for redundancy. You have spanning tree which is a crappy protocol. It always goes flapping, and then you have more outages. A lot of issues there you can run into. If you just run a single fiber somewhere with the backup of being able to splice different connectors on different strands in a multi-core fiber, then you don't lose much in redundancy, but you gain a whole lot in simplicity of installation. The same with servers. You can set up all sorts of very nice load balancing tricks with Linux and VRP and redundancy, but in the end, if then you run into all sorts of weird issues with ARP resolution not working, it just wastes a lot of time in the end, we find out. We had a hub-spoke topology. This was possible because we had these huge amounts of fiber going everywhere. Fiber doesn't have much of a distance limit. Single mode with 1310 nanometer optics can go to 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers. So we happen to have all that available, which was a very large saver for this network. Copper is cheaper, copper is widely available, but there's a distance limit of 100 meters. So if you design your network based on having to put the switch every 100 meters, you end up with rings, you end up with very breakable links, you end up with many switches that have dual functions of both core and distribution and access, triple functions maybe. And if something breaks, then something breaks for a much larger area. If there's a loop somewhere and the switch dies because of that, because of high CPU usage, then it affects a lot more, and you may not be able to actually get there to isolate the problem. Splicing fibers on the field is possible, so we could actually run out a large network with fibers we did not order before, we just had lying around from previous events, and could therefore cut to size and customize completely. It does take a long time, especially if you have a bit older splicing kit, so the advice would be the next time to get a very advanced splicing kit with 3 cameras. Are you listening, Project Lightroom? The knowing about where people are going to camp is invaluable, because it allows you to plan your datum close, allows you to plan your fiber runs before actually people start camping right on top of where you want to run your fibers. And especially when we started expanding the network, as Lisa said before, into the camping area south of the south camping on the other side of the fence, we ran into some issues where people had put up their tents over the already dug trenches, and we had to dig new trenches to bury the fiber again to protect it. It is a bit of a challenge to get connectivity in outside major metropolitan areas. The Congress building had a versatile POP, had dark fiber that we could use, and here we had to spend significant effort to get a fiber in, spend significant money on that as well, and then arrange for connectivity on top of that, over that fiber, which also was a bit of a challenge. I'll talk more about that later. Every minute you prepare, you save here, and here is a stressy situation with a very clear deadline. If you have a bunch of servers you can pre-install and pre-configure, then you save so much time because you know it works and you basically are up and running immediately. And this is especially important for network supporting services like DNS, DHCP, because without that the network doesn't really work. You need a place to work from. Team members. It is important to not have too much bureaucracy. Sometimes egos get in the way and people say, oh, this is my server and nobody else gets access to it, and then go to sleep for 12 hours or something while the thing is horribly broken. It didn't happen this time, but as a general design requirement for a network like this, it is important to remember that please check your big egos at the door and have fun. So more about the uplink. Up to about a week before the camp, we were still under the impression that we would have enough bandwidth, or at least a lot of bandwidth. A Gigi, dual Gigi, or an STM16. But a miscommunication between us and the two telcos involved in getting this line here meant that we would only be able to get an STM1. And after a lot of begging, we got some limited transit as well via a third ISP. And so managed to get about 300 megabits, 350 megabits of actual traffic off the campsite. So we hoped for more, but too bad. So we had an STM1 to Berlin. We had transit there from Cogent, peering with a few other companies in Berlin, NetSign, D-Hosting, who also gave us IPv6 transit. We hopped one hop over Telta's network to EWE-Tel, who gave us transit to here over GigE. The Berlin link first ran over the 2 ATM cards because we didn't have working POS interfaces for the 27200 routers. I think in the end it turned out that one of them was multi-mode, unlike what we were told. So when we replaced it, we got this email from our network monitoring system, oh, a multi-mode card was removed from this chassis. And we knew, that's why it didn't work. So removing the ATM, we did it halfway the Congress when we finally scored another POS card, packet over SONET card. And we could stop paying the 13% cell tax overhead for running a completely superfluous bit of ATM in our network. And we were all very happy to get rid of ATM. So, yeah, 300 megabits. Unfortunately, this time no separate IPv6 stats. We just didn't get around to setting up the service and the server for that and setting up all the monitoring for that. It basically flatlined the whole time. It's a bit of a pity, but we disabled incoming HTTP requests, incoming FTP requests, especially to the filers, just to save on some bandwidth and make it more available to the people actually here and able to enjoy it. So we ran into a couple of issues with the core router and other equipment. The most interesting one was these two guys. They had a Linksys, and whenever they connected it, it would run up the CPU of one of the line cards in our core router because it would start forwarding traffic in software. And they're shown here doing the only wise thing to a Linksys you can do to a Linksys, namely stringing it up and then flinging it away, although I don't think they actually did that. So I tried debugging the problem a little bit, and what we could see of it is that a lot of traffic actually went to the CPU that should have just flown through the hardware, and we are still in conversations with the supplier. I have to say that switching a gigabit in hardware really goes faster than switching a gigabit in software. So I was downloading something from the FTP server, and then I reseeded that line card, and suddenly the transfers went from 500 kilobytes per second to 10 megabytes per second. So there was a performance difference. I have no idea how a router can forget its own MAC address, but this is seemingly what happened when it would just go like, oh, what is this? Let's handle it in the CPU. So possibly related to this is the fact that line cards a few times just randomly rebooted. We think this sort of coincides with this Linksys being connected to the network to a port behind module 2 actually. So module 6 crashing due to this is really, really strange to me. And like I said, we're still talking to a certain vendor about it. We made an offer for the Linksys to buy it because we thought we have to have this killing equipment, but it turns out that the owners of this Linksys are scientists, so they're not interested in money, and the negotiations continue. Also, problems that once we had some line card crashes, local switching stopped working. So the primary DNS server was unreachable for a while until we finally had enough of it and implemented the workaround of just connecting it to a separate catalyst, which just worked fine. Okay, I give the floor to Maxime for wireless.
Thanks. So it is a different story and difficult story, especially for me. I do it like over 3 years now, deploying the wireless networks at the congresses, and I see always big issues in RF and especially in the design of 802.11. So this year I decided to use Trapeze networks. Aruba worked well, but there were quite some improvements to make. Trapeze sponsored us 2 controllers to run a redundant scenario. One of them crashed on the event due to hardware failure, so we had to replace it. They run basically QNX and were pretty stable if they are not hardware broken. So the vendor gave us